almost evaporated now in the region. It's trying to survive. Then what happens to Hamas? What happens to Hezbollah? What happens to the PLA? What is the situation regarding these? Because obviously Israel and the United States want to disarm them and finish them off. So what do you see happening to them?
I mean, it's a very good question. There's a lot of these questions that are on the table. For instance, there are, if you talk to Shia Arabs, even middle-class Shia Arabs, they're extremely worried where the sudden disappearance of Iran might mean for them, not even at the regional level, but within their own societies. That are they back to a time when they were basically subservient in Sunni-dominated orders or not? And then Hamas, Hezbollah, Iraqi Shias, the Hashd al-Shabi, etc., are all imagining a very different existence. Some of them are basically thinking about the fact that the resistance is over, that they have to join the political process. That, for instance, is the case in Iraq. In places like Lebanon, for instance, or with the Palestinians, perhaps the resistance will go on. I mean, you cannot have occupation and imperialism, colonialism without resistance coming back. But it will be in a very different form. So what Hezbollah, I think, people in Lebanon worry about is no longer organizing around missiles that it was lobbing into, that it could lob into Israel. That period is gone. They're imagining going back to the period between 1982 and 2000, when they fought guerrilla war against an occupying army. So I don't think, this is almost like going back to the 19th century colonialism. Imperial powers can imagine absolute domination by military means and imposing their will. But ultimately, that is not a satisfactory scenario. The locals will organize and will fight. So we may end up in a period of relative calm in the short run, but unless the United States, Europe, and Israel as well think of a political order that is not just imperial dictation, but actually creates conditions for stability, I think then, this is going to come back in another way at another time. I mean, resistance will come back in another way, another time. Maybe without Iran, but it doesn't mean that the Lebanese are going to accept South Lebanon basically being eaten up or their villages be occupied just because Iran is no longer there.
From this it follows that we need to talk a little bit about this so-called peace committee or peace council that President Trump has set up, because apparently this is going to provide the solutions to the Middle East, and perhaps even more beyond the Middle East. So how do you see this working out? Because a lot of these countries, it began with 20 or 30 countries, and now we're talking about 70 countries, and then we're talking about invitations being given to some countries, and then those invitations being withdrawn, for example, Canada. So countries like Pakistan, etc., have had to willy-nilly be part of this, because the consequences of not being part of this could not be countenanced. And I think that goes for a lot of these Muslim countries who decided to join. But the other countries are also joining in, who are not Muslim countries. So what is this? How do you see this panning out?
Well, we would love to be proven wrong. For the sake of Palestinians, in particular, I hope we could be proven wrong. But I'm dubious, because usually the way things work is that you first negotiate what you want to do and all the terms. Then you decide on a board to oversee its implementation. The way this has been happening from the beginning is that you start from the end and then work backwards, which is you first have a board which is not clear what it's going to be doing and what it's actually going to be overseeing. And so there has to be intense negotiations about what is it that this board will be implementing. And then that raises the question about the composition of the board. So a board that is basically created in a haphazard manner, without consideration of representation of people who actually you're going to be dealing with and the region you're going to be dealing with, makes it highly suspect that it would be effective. I mean, there's not a single Palestinian voice, even a co-opted Palestinian voice, on that board. There's not real Arab representation, Muslim representation on that board. And yes, countries may play this game of trying to manage President Trump or be in his good graces by being on this board. But that's the wrong reason to join the board, because it means that the effectiveness of the board or the work of the board is not actually the reason they're joining in. They even don't have a stake in there. Like, why is Palestine be important to Pakistan beyond the symbolic issue? Why would Pakistan put a skin in the game in an effective way for any details there? So the countries that really the future of the Palestinians matter to them are Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, the Palestinians themselves, maybe some European countries that have worked on this a long time, that it actually would both represent the views and also help it implement it. So, I mean, it's difficult not to be cynical about it, but as I said, I hope I'm wrong, and that there's a whole new theory of doing things that would work out. But if history's guide, I don't think it's going to work out very smoothly.
How do you see